Back for Blood is the promoted spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead 2, one of my favorite franchises in video game history. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the amount of hours that I put into Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. But the thing about Back 4 Blood, it isn't Left 4 Dead 3. There are a lot of differences when it comes to Left 4 Dead and Back 4 Blood. And one of the biggest things is right off the bat. Instead of playing as one of the, I believe, 8 up to this point announced protagonists that have all similar stats and all similar actions and all similar traits like they did in Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2, every playable character actually has different stats. Not only when it comes to health and stamina and the ability to utilize firearms or melee weapons. Some specialize in melee weapons while others specialize in firearms, but they also help the overall team. For example, Holly gives the entire team a 25 plus stamina boost, while one of my early favorites, Walker, gives the entire team a health boost. So depending on who you have on your team may mean the difference between a successful team or a deadly team. The protagonists, known as cleaners, also have something that I never would have expected in a game like this to buff or at times debuff their chances of being able to make it through whatever stage they're a part of, be it in the campaign mode or in versus, and that is the card system. Players are allowed to make their own decks, featuring cards that will give minor buffs and boosts to the characters in the team, and then at certain times even debilitate certain aspects. Like for example, one card may allow you to reload faster, but the damage that you put out with that weapon won't be as effective. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there's also a card that will not only slightly boost your health, but also give you the opportunity to be revived one more extra time if you're downed during a fight. One very interesting aspect when it comes to the card system is how it affects the campaign, because there will be corruption cards that is given to a player to choose. Some corruption cards can be detrimental to the environment, such as having a heavy thick layer of fog, or be beneficial if you're able to complete the criteria that is associated with that card, such as being able to make it through an entire stage without setting off an alarm, and get you 500 pieces of copper. These cards and decks, I was surprised. I actually enjoyed mixing and matching, figuring out what would be beneficial for not only myself, but also for the rest of the team. It's one of those implementations that when I first read about it and first heard about it, I was not really gung-ho on it. But after playing with it, after playing and seeing what I can make when it comes to a deck, I actually do enjoy this, and it's a real nice bit of strategy that doesn't feel like your characters become overpowered, or if you choose the wrong deck, you're completely screwed out of being able to make it through the campaign. And when it comes to the campaign, this is a tough campaign thus far. For players of the Left 4 Dead games, you will think that the campaign will be somewhat of a breeze outside of the higher difficulty levels, but that is not the case. The amount of zombies that are thrown at you, the amount of special ridden, as they're called, or infected that are thrown at you, including tall boys who have these one gigantic arm that can not only act as a gigantic hammer, but also can grab you and suck the life out of you. And to add to the difficulty levels, one thing I didn't really care for, and that is the fact that there are a limited number of continues per session if you're playing the campaign. If you're playing a regular or standard difficulty, you only have 3 continues, so if you die 3 times, that's game over. And that's something that the original Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2 didn't have. You could play as many times as you wanted to try to complete a stage. And I get it. It heightens the sense of difficulty and the sense of achievement if you're able to overcome without losing all of your continues. But there are times when you're playing for the first time and you're learning the stage and learning the routes and learning the enemies, and then you run out of continues and can't learn from your mistakes. One big thing that also must be complimented about the campaign, and to a certain extent even the versus mode, is the availability of guns and the variety. Beyond the fact that there are a plethora of different guns between assault rifles, shotguns, pistols, and the like, and even melee weapons like a nail bat or a machete, is the fact that every game has the ability to have these randomized weapons that are rooted in rarity levels. Now, of course, I am a little bit on the fence with that. I don't necessarily like the idea of weapons having rarity levels in a situation like this, But it does work because it feels like it's a reward for getting further and further in a campaign mission and discovering these even more beneficial weapons. What's even more beneficial is the weapon upgrades themselves. When you get to a safe house, you're able to purchase specific weapon upgrades that allows for you to, say, add a scope, or even buy a more effective weapon in general, as well as buy items like first aid kits and toolboxes to unlock stuff like ammo pouches. These weapon upgrades come at the cost of copper, which is randomly dropped throughout every map when you're playing through the campaign. At first I thought copper was this currency that you would have to spend real money on to get, but in actuality you actually get this by simply playing through the game, and you're rewarded by being able to spend said currency on items and weapons when you get to a safe house between rounds. There are also supply points that you can spend after completing a game if you do well, that are usually for customization options like your player profile and the like. You can also buy extra cards with supply points. Once again, all of these things are able to be bought with in-game currency that you get by playing the game, though I just know that by the time the game fully releases, there will be the availability of things like supply points that you'll be able to purchase with real money, as well as DLC map packs that they're promising, which isn't too bad because that's the same thing that we got when it came to Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. And the reason I've become so attached to specific special written is because there is a versus mode in Back 4 Blood. In Back 4 Blood, you are allowed to play in a best of 3 rounds series, where one team plays as the Cleaners and another team plays as the Ridden. And with the Ridden, depending on how well you compete and how well you do, you are given points that you can spend to buff the defense and the offense of whatever Ridden is on that team. Not just for yourself, but the entire team. You can also switch between Ridden when you die, so you don't have to be stuck with playing the same Ridden over and over again. Now, as I just mentioned, the versus mode availability is there. The only problem is, and this is one of the biggest issues I have with the entire game presentation thus far, is the fact that this isn't like Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2's versus. In those games, you would essentially go through the campaign, and your goal, if you were the protagonist, was to make it to the end of that section of the campaign. If you were the infected, you were trying to stop the protagonist from making it that far. And depending on how far whatever team made it would get the most amount of points and win that round. In this version of Versus, there isn't a campaign versus mode where you're trying to beat the distance, you're trying to beat the time. You will be placed in a very small arena that actually closes in as you progress, and the swarm grows and you're attacked by bugs and other insects, as well as the infected and the special Ridden. The team that lasts the longest wins the round, not how far they go. And honestly, one of the most enjoyable aspects of the Left 4 Dead games was that campaign versus mode that we don't have here, and they're pretty much saying we won't get it in Back 4 Blood. And that really hurts the longevity, in my opinion, and the enjoyment of this versus mode, because it feels so much like stuff we've already seen before. It just feels like an exaggerated version of Horde mode where you get to play as the infected or as the cleaner. Another huge issue when it comes to the versus mode, and that is the fact the game does not do a very good job at this point in time. It is just the beta, maybe it gets better with the full release, but at this point in time, it does not do a good job of balancing the teams. There were several times I was on a team where I would be playing with only one person as a teammate, and then the opposite team would have 4 people, a full team. There were other times when I would be playing a team and people would drop out, and I would have a full squad, and one person would be left on the opposing team to get slaughtered very easily. Instead of replacing the characters with bots, which they actually do in the campaign if somebody does drop out, you're stuck playing by yourself or with a limited number against a team that could be overpowering and overwhelming you very easily because they have the numbers in their advantage. This is something that I hope they definitely fix when it comes to the full game, because it is detrimental to the Versus experience. Another issue I have with Versus is the lack of rematch options. When you actually find a group of random people that you really click with against another group of random people that you really enjoyed playing against, there's no option to rematch them after the round is over in Versus mode. Instead, you just have to go right back to the lobby. I hope this is just something that's associated with the beta and is not something that is in the full game. From a technical aspect, I did see some frame rate drops. Of course, connectivity issues happen here and there, especially when the beta first opened up for everyone. I really didn't have any drop games. There were a few times when it took a little bit longer to load between sections than you would have expected. I had some weird glitches here and there, like one time I loaded into a game and my character was holding an invisible gun that eventually loaded. The only real detrimental moment I had when it came to glitches, and something that is solely connected to the beta and won't be a factor when the full game releases, and that is something that happened during the campaign when it was just all bots. It was myself and 3 bots, and one of the bots just got stuck. They just stopped moving, and we progressed to a point where I couldn't return because I'm almost at the safe house, and the bot refuses to move, so I had to quit the game. That was almost an hour of gameplay that meant nothing because I had to quit. On the versus side of the fence, I experienced a very weird glitch where the losing team dropped out one by one, and instead of the game just shutting down the server and giving us the victory, the round continued on and we played against only the AI, and then when it was time for us to be the written, the game didn't load anybody. It didn't load any swarm, it didn't load any AI bots to fight against. It was just stuck in this stagnant rotation of nothingness until they actually won the round because the game didn't load anything and the timer just kept going until it surpassed our time. Going back to what I was stating about the replacement of bots, another big gameplay issue though has to be the bots themselves in the campaign mode. Playing with humans is the only way to go in this, which is surprising because considering how well the AI bots were in the previous Left 4 Dead games, I expected something very similar to that in this game, but instead we got some very stupid bots. Also, from a presentation aspect, I will say some of the corniness and actually enjoyability factor, the goofiness of Left 4 Dead is not really seen here. This is treated more seriously. I think it kind of hurts for it because we have so many serious zombie post-apocalyptic games, and Left 4 Dead kind of stood out for being a little bit wacky and goofy and downright funny. Overall, I will say I do have some mixed feelings when it comes to Back 4 Blood, especially when it comes to this form in the open beta. From a gameplay perspective, from a campaign perspective, from the upgrade system, from the card deck system, I'm thoroughly impressed, and I think it's really, really strong. But from a versus mode perspective, one of the most enjoyable aspects about Left 4 Dead was the campaign versus mode, but instead we have this watered down version of versus mode that's very similar to everything else that's out there right now when it comes to these type of games, including World War Z that feels a lot similar to this in not only aesthetics but also presentation. Technically, the game is really good. I was surprised that the servers did so well. I didn't really have too many frame rate drops. I didn't have really any disconnects. I didn't have too much that would make me think that when the game fully is released, that it's going to be a technical nightmare. There are some bugs, there are some glitches here and there that hopefully will be fixed and cleaned up by the time that the game is fully released. But from what I experienced thus far from just an open beta, it's actually quite polished for a game that's coming out in 2 months. I am looking forward to the full release, and I believe it will be a very good game. It may not be as revolutionary or as long-lasting as what it's aspiring to be, but it's definitely doing a lot of good things and a lot of things right, that hopefully the things that are wrong will be fixed when the game does release in October.
Let me take care of this.